Hey, greetings, it's Daniel, and today I want to discuss the topic of white witches, black witches, gray witches, and one, why I don't use the terms, and one, why I respect those who do use the terms. First, I'm going to explain why I don't personally use the term white witch or black witch or gray witch or any variations of that. One, because the way I view magic is I feel magic is neutral. It's neither positive or negative. It's neutral. The witch itself is what actually makes that is either positive or negative. But I also feel like what is good and ethical does vary from culture to person to person to person. I think that's a really complicated topic, and I don't really want to get into it right now. But I do feel like that's something that is definitely varies from witch to witch, person to person, and some decisions what I would see as a positive thing, other people would say well you didn't, and also hindsight's 2020. Sometimes I've done something that I thought was a good decision and I look back and thinking that was not a good decision. But why I don't that's why another reason why I don't use it is because I think I've discussed my opinions on magic. Magic is bringing the light aspects and the dark aspects together, and when they come together they create a spark, and that's where magic begins, in my opinion, is that balance of nature, because we have to learn to live a balanced lifestyle, and we have dark aspects of ourselves and light aspects of ourselves. Then we're all part of who we are. Divinity is both dark and light. I don't believe in all good deity or an all evil deity. I just believe in deity, and I think it's removed from the idea of good and evil. I think that concept of good and evil is a man-made concept, not a universal one. Sorry, I'm smoking. I know, need to quit. Tacky, I know. Okay. I digress. But I don't use the terms because, like you said, it doesn't fit into my personal cosmology. I don't view the world as ultimately good or ultimately evil. I don't view nature that way. And because my spiritual practice is a nature-based religion, I look to nature. I can't really see that in nature. I don't see all good or all evil. I see I see animals that can be incredibly kind and incredibly cruel all at the same time, and I feel like that's natural. But why do I respect people who do use the term? One, sometimes it's used very much like a lot of witches will sometimes use the term Wiccan, even though it doesn't really apply to them, because it's awful a term. The term witch can be a very loaded term and can make people uncomfortable. And while you certainly don't have to share your spiritual path with anyone other than yourself, sometimes, especially if you're a professional tarot card reader, astrologer, whatever, a professional witch. I do know people who really are professional. They work at stores and they give out spell advice, as part of their, job. Using the term white witch can just really, it helps make people more comfortable. And because I understand, because they don't personally necessarily use the term, but they're using it because that's what people understand. Helping people understand sometimes is better. Because if you're trying to read cards for somebody and they are very uncomfortable, they don't, sometimes that can diffuse the situation. And so I see that, I understand why they use it in that instances. I also have friends who are Christian witches, non-Wiccan. They don't borrow from Wicca. But they use the witch because in their cosmology, there are Christian witches that aren't like me. My Christianity is very different from mainstream Christianity, and I would say that's true for most Christian witches. But we definitely see that some Christian witches do hold on to the idea of God and Satan. I don't personally believe in a literal being named Satan, but I do know people who do. That is part of a lot of belief systems. I also know some Gnostic witches who wouldn't call themselves Christians, who believe in a all-powerful good deity and then like a false evil deity. You can look into Gnosticism on your own time, so to speak, but I'm not going to go into there. But so I see where that's coming from. So for me, in their cosmology, there is good and evil. And so to define themselves as looking on the good side and not make sense in their cosmology. So I'm not, in a lot of cultures, that's the way it is. I have a good friend who is who's a Mexican, and he practices Mexican witchcraft. I can't think of the Spanish word. I'm horrible with Spanish, but they definitely have the concept of white witches and black witches. That's definitely a part of a lot of Mexican witchcraft culture. I mean, like, they also would consider themselves Catholic, even though they have these alternative witch beliefs too. But that's just part of the culture. So they definitely use the term white witch and black witch, and that's okay. I understand where it's coming from in the culture and the religion. I understand that. So I don't look down on them. I have met some Wiccans who, and even some modern pagans, who, when they meet people who, for instance, practice forms of Mexican witchcraft, who get very offensive because they don't understand the culture it comes from. I also can tell you from just my study of history, there are two groups that were often referred to as white witches, although they never use the term themselves. In America, we had the powwow doctors or powwow artists, which was a form of Christian folk healing and magic, mostly healing, although they did do folk charms, although they never used the term witch. Actually, the powwow was the positive one, the witch was the negative. That's part of the culture. Although the outsiders often called them, they often called them white witches. Of course, again, they didn't use that term for themselves. They didn't. And then I also know the cunning folk. The cunning folk of England and Europe, they had different names. By the way, were Christian practitioners majority of the time, because that was the culture they lived in. That's what they knew. That's what they had. There wasn't anything else. I mean, that was the choices they had. Definitely had pagan elements, definitely had elements that were non-Christian, but if you would have asked them, they would not have called themselves witches for the most part, and they would have called themselves either Catholic or Protestant or Christian in some sense. But they definitely practiced magical practices and often worked with energies and forces and familiar spirits, and sometimes even spirits that probably had origin with pagan gods and goddesses. So, and they were often called white witches. Again, they would not have used that term for themselves, but the people would have understood it as white magic, good magic. Magic, benevolent magic, opposed to malevolent. So I understand people who come from that background using that term. And I also have a few friends who are light workers or who are into like New Age stuff, who also use the term white witch. Again, and they'll cosmology, there is this ultimate good and ultimate dark, or in those sense, it's not really ultimate evil or something like a Satan figure. It's more like the light or the white side is considered the spirits who are progressing from the darkness, so they would use the term white witch. So again, I don't have a trouble with that. I don't understand why people do. Like, I certainly understand why a Wiccan wouldn't, a lot of Wiccans would be, especially traditional Wiccans, would be definitely not like the term white and black magic. That's simply not part of the cosmology. So why would they use the term? But I get really upset when I see pagans almost like they kind of, I don't know, they just kind of look down their nose at those people who do, forgetting that witchcraft is not a religion, it's a practice. And a lot of people from a lot of different religions practice witchcraft, or people from non-religions, because again, witchcraft is a practice. A lot of times it's spiritual or religious. I mean, there are religious forms of witchcraft, such as Wicca. It's not the only form. I do know some people who practice traditional witchcraft who wouldn't call it a religion, but definitely have spiritual aspects to it. And I know pagan witches who wouldn't call themselves Wiccans, but definitely is a religious aspect to it. And they wouldn't have used the term white witch. So I'm just trying to be thought-provoking. Before we look our noses down at people who use labels that we don't personally agree with, we need to see where they're coming from. Sometimes it's not from a lack of knowledge. A lot of times these people know very well why they're using the term. We're trying to take our belief systems and try to get them to conform to it. I hear a lot of pagans complain about Christianity. Not all pagans. I know lots of pagans who have no problem with Christians. That's not for them, and that's okay. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I have met some pagans and a few Wiccans who do seem to have a dislike for Christianity, and that's fine. I mean, a lot of times they have very valid reasons for that, and they've been hurt, and so I understand where they're coming from, and I get it. But I feel like we have to be very careful, because we can't dismiss something just because it doesn't fit into our personal cosmology and beliefs. Something can be very much valid and authentic and not match our beliefs. Allow people to follow the path that works best for them. And that's kind of what I'm saying is, if the term white witch works for you and it's part of your personal cosmology, I have no problem with it. I don't personally call myself a white witch because I don't always, life isn't always flowers and roses, but people have different opinions, different subjects, and I try to respect people regardless of the labels they use. For me, it's not so much the label, but the life they live. If you tell me you're a Wiccan or a pagan or a druid or a light worker or an indigo child or whatever else, I'm going to respect that until you give me a reason not to. Like, it's not my place. I try to look beyond labels because labels are for soup cans, not for people. So I try to get past the labels and look at the person in their individual past as far as I understand. And I don't always know what's going on. And some of the people who I originally thought I use lack of a better term, were fluff bunnies, after I got to know them, were anything but. And some of the people who I thought were very well knowledged on witchcraft, magic, and the occult, and just spirituality in general, after I got to know them, I realized that was only surface deep. You probe any deeper, and they had no personal practice beyond what they appeared to be. So like I said, I try not to judge people based on the labels they use. I try to get to know people and see. And sometimes, like I said, if someone's knowledgeable, sometimes just going out and telling them not to do something is not going to help. Getting to know people and building relationship with them and allowing them to understand their reasoning is so much more better than trying to force down our opinions on someone, because they're not going to listen, and you have yours, they have yours, and sometimes it's just best to let people have their opinions. And if it's going to cause such a problem, move on. I mean, there's lots of people on YouTube. I've watched tons of videos about people who practice Christian witchcraft, and I've watched tons of videos why it's not possible and why people shouldn't use that label. There were times when I regretted I've made some comments that I look back on and think that probably wasn't the best idea, because I've just learned that making an argument out of nothing is not worth it. Like I said, and I try to catch myself when I go to someone's thing and they say, well, we don't respect that, and I try to think, okay, that's their opinion and they have entitled to it, and I'm just going to move on. I don't need to spend my time explaining my path, and nor do they need to spend time explaining their path. I don't know them personally. I just know what I see on YouTube, and I don't know the experiences they have. They don't know mine, and so I'm more feeling that we should build a relationship with people before we judge them on the labels that they use. So my opinion on the term white witch and black witch, I don't use it personally. I respect those who do. I just don't personally, it's not something part of my personal path. Many blessings.